In August 2024, MI6 quietly helped stop an ISIS terror plot at a Taylor Swift concert in Vienna Ernst Happel Stadium. They didn't make the headlines, and they got no public credit. But that's how they operate, and always have. Today, we're uncovering the true story of MI6, how it began, how it evolved, and how it still shapes global events from behind the scenes. So, let's get started. The birth. It all started with fear, not of actual spies, but of stories about them. In the early 1900s, British newspapers were obsessed with wild claims. Rumors spread that German agents were blending into society, stealing secrets, and preparing for war. Most of it was fiction, but the fear made its way straight to the top. At the time, Britain ruled over a quarter of the world's population, and had no foreign intelligence service. None. While powers like Germany, France, and Russia had secret police and surveillance forces, Britain was flying blind. So, in 1909, the government quietly created something new, the Secret Service Bureau. Its job? Defend Britain against foreign threats. The Bureau was split in two, one half for domestic security, that became MI5. The other half was focused on operations abroad, and would later become MI6. They put a naval officer named Captain Mansfield Smith Cumming in charge. This captain had no spy experience and no foreign language skills, but he built a culture of secrecy from day one, signing every memo with green ink, C, a tradition MI6 chiefs still follow today. Then the true test of the essence of MI6 broke out, World War I. Almost immediately, the secret agency was thrown into the deep end. Agents were recruited across Europe. Operations sprang up in Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. They had to smuggle reports out of occupied cities, track troop movements, and intercept communications any way they could. But their most important breakthrough wasn't in the field. It was in the shadows. Code breaking. Early MI6 work in cryptography laid the foundation for Britain's future intelligence dominance, and that foundation would come to life during World War II at Bletchley Park, where British analysts faced one of the most terrifying machines in history, Enigma. The German military encrypted every single message, from troop movements to bombing targets, using the Enigma machine. It scrambled letters with billions of possible combinations. The code changed every 24 hours, and if you couldn't break it by midnight, you'd lose the war. MI6 helped fund and support the brilliant minds at Bletchley Park. They gathered mathematicians, engineers, linguists, and built the bombe, a machine designed to brute force the code. Eventually, it worked. British cryptanalysts cracked Enigma, and from that point on, the Allies could read German military plans in real time without them knowing. With their new gained power, they rerouted German convoys, stopped their air raids, and foiled their ambushes. The Nazis had no idea they were being watched from inside their own communications. Historians estimate that breaking Enigma shortened the war by up to 2 years and saved over 14 million lives. But defeating the Nazis didn't mean MI6's work was done. In fact, their most complex battles were just beginning. The Golden Age. As the Cold War froze the world into two camps, East versus West, communism versus capitalism, MI6 entered its so-called Golden Age. Their new enemy was no longer one country. It was an idea. Global communism, spreading rapidly from the Soviet Union across Europe, Asia, and beyond. To stay ahead, MI6 had to evolve fast. Alongside the newly formed CIA, they launched operations to recruit agents in East Berlin, Moscow, and Prague that served them important data about the enemy. Information from these missions shaped everything from nuclear policy to military strategy. But this era wasn't just about human spies. It was about technology. Surveillance planes flew higher, bugs got smaller, radios became scramblers, and MI6 had to innovate. They began tapping phone lines, intercepting Soviet broadcasts, and developing electronic eavesdropping techniques that would define modern intelligence. And yet, even during this period of innovation, MI6 suffered one of its greatest humiliations. The Cambridge Five. Brilliant, well-bred British graduates secretly working for the Soviets had embedded themselves deep inside MI6 and other government branches. For years, they fed secrets directly to Moscow, identities of agents, covert operations, entire networks. By the time two of them defected in 1951, it was clear the betrayal had spanned years. The scandal shook MI6 to its core and led to sweeping changes in how the agency vetted and monitored its own officers. And there was another mystery tied to MI6 during the Cold War, Operation Mockingbird. The program involved covertly influencing global media to push anti-communist narratives around the globe. Though Britain's role remains classified, MI6 was known to collaborate on propaganda campaigns across Europe. Still, the agency continued to rack up wins. It orchestrated defections, exposed enemy spy rings, and leveraged its growing technological edge to monitor key global happenings. MI6 was now operating at full capacity. It had gone from a handful of men in a room to one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies on Earth. When the Cold War ended, MI6 faced an identity crisis. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and the clear enemy it had tracked for decades disappeared with it. But the threats that replaced this enemy were murkier, more agile, and harder to trace. So MI6 had to evolve again. Fast. Modern era. During the modern era, MI6 began to focus on problems. They had to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, track terrorist cells, disrupt drug cartels, and investigate global crime networks. Then, 9/11 came, and suddenly, terrorism moved to the top of the list. MI6 began working closely with the CIA, sharing information and tracking leads across the Middle East and beyond. Much of that intelligence helped lead to Osama bin Laden and disrupted attacks that never made it to the headlines. In 2003, MI6 helped stop a plot to strike Heathrow Airport. In 2006, they played a role in uncovering the transatlantic aircraft plot, where terrorists had planned to detonate liquid explosives on multiple planes flying from London to North America. And during the 2012 London Olympics, they were part of a huge, silent effort to detect and prevent threats before they reached the public. In the end, most people had no idea how close danger came. But while terrorism kept MI6 busy, something else was already reshaping the way intelligence worked: the Internet. By 2020, MI6 had helped launch the National Cyber Force, a new branch of intelligence built not just to protect digital systems, but to actively strike at foreign threats. The modern MI6 officer might never carry a weapon or wear a disguise. Instead, they could be a data analyst, a coder, an AI engineer, or someone who studies quantum computing. But when an agency operates in the shadows, it's only a matter of time before questions surface about what really happens there, and who holds them to account. MI6 Controversies. In 2004, Abdel Hakim Belaj and his pregnant wife Fatima were trying to reach London. They passed through Malaysia, hoping to start a new life. But instead of freedom, they disappeared. MI6 had quietly shared their whereabouts with the CIA. Within days, both were hooded, bound, and forced onto a plane bound for Libya. Abdel had spoken out against Gaddafi's regime. Now he was being handed back to it. In Tripoli, he was thrown into a cell and beaten for years. Fatima was separated from him. Alone in a dark concrete room, she gave birth on the floor. It would take over a decade for the truth to come out, and when the truth was no longer possible to hide, MI6 only apologized. Quietly. But this wasn't the only time they were involved in a controversy. In September 2002, MI6 helped produce one of the most important and damaging documents in modern British history. It was called an intelligence dossier on Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, but the public would remember it by another name: the Dodgy Dossier. The report claimed Iraq was stockpiling chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam Hussein was preparing to use them, that he could launch an attack within 45 minutes. Once the British press got a hold of this information, they went wild. Several news outlets carried outrageous headlines like Brits 45 Minutes from Doom and Chemical War. The Parliament was convinced. The public was, too. And just 6 months later, Britain joined the United States in invading Iraq. But there was a problem. None of it was true. The 45-minute claim came from a single, unverified source. Some say it was a high-level Iraqi official. Others say it was a taxi driver repeating a story he overheard in the back of his cab 2 years earlier. When no weapons were found in Iraq, MI6 was left with a question it couldn't shake. How could the one agency built to separate truth from lies get it so completely wrong? Later, it came out that in a private meeting that MI6 Chief Richard Dearlove had warned ministers that in the United States, intelligence and facts were being fixed around the policy. The decision to go to war would first be made, and then evidence would have to come later. But as MI6 looks to the future, the questions left behind by its past aren't just about what went wrong. They're about how to move forward in a world that's getting harder to read every day. The future. Now, the old methods, bribes, blackmail, and listening devices, still have their place. But today's intelligence work has changed. AI is already being used to track terrorist financing, map out social networks, and detect unusual behavior long before a human analyst would notice it. On the flip side, MI6 now faces opponents using those same tools: automated surveillance, deepfakes, cloned voices, and entire identities that can be manufactured in minutes. If MI6 is to keep up this time, it must move faster, think wider, and operate under more public scrutiny than ever before. For MI6, the mission remains the same: to see what others miss. But how exactly they'll do that is what keeps changing. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you found this story interesting, check out the channel for more interesting videos like this.